Summer is here, and that means it's time for summer events at Serenbe. Throughout June and July, join us every weekend for live music Fridays on the farmhouse porch, the Saturday farmers market and farm tours, a bevy of weekend wine tastings, goat yoga, and you can tour our furnished model homes. We also have lots of special events, which include multiple film screenings hosted by the Art Farm, a floral arranging class at Serenbe Farms, and of course, the annual Chat Hills 4th of July parade. Head to the events calendar in our show notes to learn more. We'd love to see you this summer in Serenbe. Lisa and Jim Challenger were looking to move away from their freezing Chicago weather, yet found little success until Lisa stumbled across a TikTok of Serenbe that showed off the distinctive architecture, farm-to-table meals, and easy access to nature. They first visited in June of last year and were full-time residents by August. Lisa played a central role getting Serenbe holiday ready last year, and the pair have already moved into a second home. They're loving life in their new forever community. In this interview, Steve and I chat with Lisa and Jim about why they chose Serenbe after looking all over the country, their famous family business, the Challenger Bread Pan, and finding a devoted following on social media.
I started following this woman, Leslie Graham, who was sort of like a Southern influencer, has very cool style. She bought a bunch of property and doing these really cool renovations. And she made this video one day and posted it on TikTok. And she's driving through this neighborhood and showing all the different architecture and having brunch at the hill, dinner at the farmhouse, and wine tasting. So I sent her a message. I'm like, Leslie, are you on a movie set? Where are you? She's like, oh, Lisa, you would love it here. It's called Serenbe.
Woody, Jim, we are so excited to have you guys on Serenbe Stories today. Welcome.
Thanks for having us. It's going to be exciting.
Steve, as always, great to see you.
I'm looking forward to it, and you all look ready for a great conversation today.
Yeah. So you guys are very familiar with Serenbe Stories, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But you know that the first thing we ask everybody is, what's your Serenbe story? How did you discover Serenbe? How did you get here? Were you planning to move? All sorts of stuff. So I don't know who wants to start off that story, but what's your Serenbe story, guys?
I'm letting Woody jump into that one.
So I think during the pandemic, being stuck in the Chicago area, being stuck in the Chicago weather, seeing a lot of our friends and family going off to their warmer climate houses and swimming in pools and sitting on porches. And we were stuck inside our house in Chicago, looking outside at the ice and the snow and the rain and the sleet and the gray skies. And we just sort of said, like, this is not a good place to be stuck. What if we started looking for a warmer climate to move to? But that was just sort of a thought of maybe in a couple of years. So we thought we'd probably build. So we're like, we should start looking at areas where maybe we would build a house. We looked at Austin, Texas. We went to Asheville. Nothing was really clicking for us. And also during the pandemic, I started a TikTok because I was bored. So kept me busy. And I started following this woman, Leslie Graham, who was sort of like a Southern influencer, has very cool style. She bought a bunch of property and doing these really cool renovations. And she made this video one day and posted it on TikTok. And she's driving through this neighborhood and showing all the different architecture and having brunch at the hill, dinner at the farmhouse, and wine tasting. So I sent her a message. I'm like, Leslie, are you on a movie set? Where are you? She's like, oh, Lisa, you would love it here. It's called Serenbe. So I'm immediately like, get immediately on the computer. And so I say to Jim, I was like, I don't know. I just found this place. Like, I think I said Atlanta. And he's like, Atlanta? I'm like, I don't know. I think it's in Atlanta. We should check it out. So we kind of put it on the list of places that maybe we would visit. And then I found your Serenbe Stories podcast on the Serenbe website. So I would drive our son to school every day, again, through snow, ice, sleet, listening to the podcast the way there and the way back. And I'd come back and I'd be like, okay, listen to the story today. So here's what's happening at Serenbe. And Jim's like, oh my God, you've got to stop talking about this place.
Well, and I'll jump in a little. The place we looked at outside Asheville was kind of like a total bust. It felt subdivision. And like, Lisa, I can't hear about a place. I'll go looking anywhere, but I just can't sit. I've got to see it in person. I got to feel it, really.
He thought it would be similar to what we had looked at in North Carolina. So listening to your podcast, blah, 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 we're like, all right, we're going to go down and visit in June. and contacted Christy again through the Serenbe real estate website and said, I think we said we're looking at lots. I said, I know there's still lots available. We're probably looking to move in the next 2 years. So met with Christy, drove us around, showed us lots. And we were like, out of curiosity, is there any houses we could just pop in, like just to see what the houses are like here? So we did look at a couple of houses. And then I think before we were even leaving that trip, we were probably here for about a week. I think we all, including our son Henry, were sort of like, God, it's pretty amazing here. And I don't know who said it first, but someone was like, maybe we should just buy a house and not wait 2 years to build. And what if we just moved now? But we had just completed building, again, north of Chicago. I think that was a 3.5-year process, building our house there. So it seemed kind of crazy and impulsive, even for us. But I think we went back and talked about it. And in July, we made the decision, let's come back to Serenbe, actually look at houses, see if we can make this happen.
And I think part of that is our 17-year-old said he would move, right? So his first couple of years of high school were pandemic. So he's kind of not really experienced in high school life, and he loves the outdoors and he loves to fish. So he said we should move. And we're like, you want to leave in the middle of high school? He goes, yes. And I love it there. And I can tell you guys love it there. So yeah, we came back and just started talking about it.
It happens, right? We're not the first ones, I think, that have been this crazy. So yeah, came back in July, found the house, went home, listed our house that sold in 24 hours and moved here in probably 3 weeks. So that was July 14th
June,
or something.
The first visit was June, and I think we were here first week of August.
Yep. Yeah.
You were totally part of the community.
And then, but the community makes you part of the community, so that I think was part of what we felt in June and still continue to feel is the community just is so friendly and welcoming, and everybody talks to you. They call it being Serenbe, where it doesn't matter where you're going, whether you're walking, whether you're in your golf cart. You see somebody and you talk for 15 minutes or in half an hour, and you just keep on going. And whether you know them or not, you talk and engage with everybody here. It's wonderful, really.
And even some of the first people we met were Chad and Kara. We met them at Friday Farmhouse Music in June when we were on vacation. And then we were like, we're thinking of buying a lot and moving here in a couple of years. And they're like, oh, we just moved here and blah, blah, blah. And we just spent Father's Day with them. We just had them at our house for Father's Day. So clearly, the two of the first people we met here, and Monica as well, hosted a little get together for parents that had some teens. And obviously we're still very tight. And,
Well, and I think that's a great point that Henry, your son, you're not going to uproot him in the middle of high school, but if he's instigating, I think it's been an amazing transition for him.
And as a parent, you could never ask your son or child. Most parents wouldn't ask their child to move in the middle of high school. It's just not the time. But yeah, he was willing. It was just, we looked at each other and we're like, well, let's just go look and maybe this will be a reality.
Right. Well, and a lot of his friends are older too. So they were going off to college. So it was kind of like everybody was getting ready to go their own way. So it's sort of like the timing worked for everybody.
Right. Well, and he is going to be the first Acton graduate. He's finished his year. Tell us a little bit about that, because that's a new model. I mean, for Serenbe, we've had it here for 5+ years, but the new building that he's going to get to move into next year. So how has that been for him? That's a very different model of education.
Yeah, very different. I mean, so the high school he was at, New Trier, were 4,000 students. There were over 1,100 kids in his class, and he's now one. So, Launchpad has 6. So Launchpad has 6. He's the oldest. But then next year, his final year, I think it's doubling in size. I think there's going to be about 12 students in Launchpad, which they call high school.
Maybe a few more. And I think I read the book almost immediately. I don't think I read the book when we were here in June. I think when we moved here, I think I was talking to the Mattises, and then they told me about the book and about Acton, and I loved everything about it. Read the book probably in a weekend, but Henry's at a different school, but then it wasn't really working out so well. And then he came to Acton. He's kind of an independent kid. It's a perfect kind of place, especially entering in high school, because he likes to do his own thing. He doesn't like to be told what to do. And so this way he's independent, right? He sits, he gets his work done. He knows what needs to be done. It's been a great fit. It's a great school concept.
When he started was December. He started the same, I think, week or maybe week after that the new guide for Launchpad. So the high school teacher, Miss Stephanie, started. So they started together, and he absolutely loves her. We adore her. She is beyond amazing. So that's made a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, you guys were raving about her. Well, and then he'll get to be in the new classrooms next year. And again, first graduate.
And we just toured the new campus. It's incredible.
Oh my gosh.
It's incredible. It's going to be amazing. It's just the inside space, but going to connect to the outside space and sort of, it's a Serenbe school, right? You're just connected to nature inside and out. And it's an amazing campus.
It's a real example of what you can do with biophilic design. And a lot of people that means bringing nature inside. But as you can see, we've just made it so that you see nature, but then the school is its own entity.
Exactly. And you can flow from inside to outside. You're not inside, you're not outside. You're just where you need to be. I think the kids are going to love it.
And I think, Steve, you had told us about how the fencing, you have to fence it because it's a school, it's the law, but the fence will be in the woods. And so John was showing us that when we were getting a tour of the school. I was like, yeah, I remember Steve saying like, they won't feel fenced in. They're safe, but you don't see the fences. They see woods.
Yeah, because Georgia says it has to be fenced. And so let's hide the fence so the kids don't feel a fence. They feel nature.
And you see the color of the building rather than thinking about wood and trees. It's really the colors of wildflowers that you find in nature. And so it's much more alive.
Alive's a good word.
Just want to ask Jim about the pink pool.
It's very pink.
I love that pink pool.
That's right. That's right. So you guys have both done super cool stuff in your careers. And I don't know like how far back we want to go, but I would love to sort of just focus on a little bit of your backgrounds and your careers. Lisa, you did a lot of time in hospitality and some fun stories working in Chicago. And then Jim, you did more, and I'm not even like 100% sure, like coding, digital, something. But then you ended up making a bread pan. So I kind of want a little bit of the arc of how in the world we got here.
Okay, I guess we'll start with me. So yeah, I came out of the tech world. I was in there since my early 20s and just kind of ended up getting out of that. And bread became something to do with my time, something to do with my brain, something to do with my hands, more creative than being a programmer. So I'm a programmer by trade or whatever. And it was just a passion that you can ask Lisa. I tend to do these deep dives into things. And so I started baking. And then I found this community of people on Instagram, and it was, I don't want to say better than the community of humans, but I mean, I made friends with bakers all over the world, and it really engaged me. It spurred me to bake more. It spurred me to learn more about it. And the bread pan was just it wasn't really born to be a business. It was born because I was frustrated that home ovens don't bake bread very well because bread needs steam and home ovens are designed to vent steam. So I met a woman through Instagram once again who makes copper cookware in her garage. And we started cooking because I also love to cook. Just talking about her pans and her process. She tried to make them the way they made them in the 1800s. But I was looking down at her pans on the website and she had a cast iron skillet designed around an 1800s skillet. And I asked her whether she made it. She said yes, and told her about my idea of a cast iron pan for baking bread. And so we talked about it a lot. I knew nothing about cast iron. I've never built anything in my life. Like, once again, a programmer's on a keyboard all the time. And so she hooked me up with a product designer. She only lived a few hours north of us, and she hooked me up with a cast iron foundry that was only an hour or two north of her. And I was kind of off to the races. I was just going to build pans for me. And I was keeping track of all my costs. And I think I had figured out we had to sell 20 or 25 in order to get back my costs. And so I made 10. I kept 4. I gave 6 to friends. And people started baking and posting on Instagram. And all of a sudden I had 10 emails. And it was 100 emails. And it was 500 emails of, I want this pan. And Lisa and I think we're sitting in our kitchen like we were literally seasoning the pans in the backyard in a pizza oven and boxing them in our kitchen. And I'm like, this is not going to work. We've got to figure something else out. And I think that's where Challenger Breadware came from. Even the name came from a friend on Instagram. He said, well, you were in software. We should just call it Breadware. I thought, it's a perfect idea. So that's where Breadware came from, as I went from software to Breadware. And I thought it was just ideal. And so Lisa and I launched. It was tough being a startup, as anybody who's listening or anybody who's done it. It's really hard to be a startup. Foundries didn't want to take my business, and they wanted me to buy a bunch of pans. So then I made it sort of a big bet. The only way I could get them made was to buy a bunch of them. And then we got the first batch, and they weren't great. And so I'd started looking for another one, and the foundry burned down. So just as we launched, we ran out of pans almost immediately. And I had this other foundry in the works. And actually, they were the ones that made me buy a whole bunch of them, or they weren't going to take my business because I was too little and they were used to just working with big companies. So we got kind of lucky. And so we launched, and like I said, selling pans all over the world to friends and then to sort of everybody. And then the pandemic hit, and then the whole world was talking about bread baking, especially sourdough bread baking. Everybody's stuck at home making bread. And so then I went back to my entrepreneurial ways of working 12-hour days, 7 days a week, and literally kind of burned out in the end, but had so much fun connecting once again with bakers, making something that's useful that everybody used. And I ended up, because I sort of burned out on it, selling it to someone in Chicago who's still running it. And I'm just on it as an advisor now. He's doing great things with the company. And even when we moved to Serenbe, we were amazed at how many people knew of the bread pan. We were actually shocked that, I mean, I don't know, a dozen people. We came down with some pans that we had in our garage, and we gave them to friends and people we met. So it was a great way for Lisa and I to then meet people when we first got here. So it's been a fun process. And I had stopped baking, but I started sourdough starter 3 days ago now. So I hope to get back to baking bread for the first time in a year.
You just needed a little break.
I just needed a break.
Yeah.
But it was between Instagram was the way I was like 4 hours a day at work. Bread baking was 4 hours a day at work. The company was 4 to 6 hours a day at work. And it was fun, but too much.
Yeah.
So yes, it'll be good because it was a passion. It's kind of, I think it kind of happens when you take a passion and it becomes.
Is there a bread tasting in the future?
A bread tasting, Steve?
Yeah. So that was part of the fun of bread, is giving it away. Yeah, you can ask Lisa. So then I went from making a little bit for us, and then I made like 2 loaves, then it was 4, then it was 8. And we just would give loaves away to our friends. Probably the best story is when the pandemic hit, Lisa sent me a photo of no bread in the grocery store shelves. It's like, we got to make some bread for the community. And so we said, well, we'll just bake 12, which became 16 loaves a day until the pandemic is over.
Hold on.
Little did we know. So 55 days in of making 16 loaves a day, we thought it's not ending. And Lisa and I, it was just, we were pantsing it up. We were putting it in a big cooler outside our house, and the people didn't have to come in. We didn't really interact with anybody. Then we talked to people sort of long distance as they came to pick up their bread. So it was, once again, very fulfilling. But yeah, the pandemic didn't end in 55 days.
Oh my God.
We did.
So how many pans have you sold since the beginning?
Tens of thousands. Probably upwards over, I don't even know now, 50, 75,000 all over the world. Literally every country. It was kind of what I said to all my friends is, I'll make sure I can get to every country. I felt like with the internet and shipping that the world should be small, but it was way harder than I ever guessed to get us. It's 20 pounds in a box, 22 pounds or something like that, to get that pan to every country. The shipping was expensive. I didn't really understand duties because I'd never made a product before. Countries like Australia have 0 duties. Countries like Brazil basically double the price of the pan. It's unbelievable. So Australia is literally none. Brazil, literally almost the cost of the pan just to buy it in that country. So it was a big learning experience, but great.
And every business consultant that we brought in said, okay, number 1, you have to stop shipping worldwide. It's a loss leader. You're losing money. And Jim's like, no, I won't do it. Like there are some countries that the pan gets shipped to that like you don't even make like $1 on the pan because it's sort of, it is what it is. But yeah, Jim was like, no, it's got to be available worldwide.
So we did. We cut the cost of shipping. We didn't charge people the amount of shipping. We just took out our profit because it was back to, these were friends of mine. And I committed from day one that, yes, I'll figure out a way to get it to you in Malaysia. Or I'll figure out a way to get it to you in Brazil. I had to keep that commitment. I kept trying to get the pan cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, but it's really, really hard because it's just a big hunk of iron.
Well, and everyone said too, make it overseas. That's what you got to do. You got to make it overseas. You got to make it in China, or there were some other places suggested.
Oh, yeah. No. We didn't want China. We did look at factory in Istanbul. There was one, a foundry in Brazil, but we still never sort of figured out a way to kind of make that happen, to kind of make it a little bit more locally. But we didn't want to go to China route. It's a little bit cheaper cast iron. Didn't seem like it was really going to save us that much money in the long run. And it didn't feel right. You know, it was made in Wisconsin and seasoned in Indiana, and that felt good. And we were from Chicago. So it was just within driving distance. We could drive to the foundry. We could drive to the factory that seasoned all our pans for us. And then it was just a made in America pan.
Yeah. So Woody, how involved were you in this? I mean, obviously you were supporting, like, let's do it. Let's make more bread. But I know that you started getting on TikTok were you already doing social? I mean, you have a really great hospitality marketing kind of background. So
yeah, I wasn't doing TikTok. I didn't even know what it was. That was definitely pandemic inspired, and did kind of start off with bread baking videos. And again, we just built the house. We had horses in the backyard. I think the first TikTok that I made was just, I think, a video of walking out to the barn, like, to feed the horses. Yep. And we went that night to dinner at a friend's house. We had like a very small core group of friends that we would still see, like 2 families. And so we went over to the house, and their teenage daughters came running up, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're on the FYP." I'm like, "Oh my God, did I do something wrong?" I'm like, "What does that mean?" They're like, "On TikTok." I'm like, "Well, all I did was post a video. Is that bad?" They're like, No. FYP is the For You page. That's really good." I'm like, "Okay." And so then they were like, "Oh my God, you're going viral." So it was just something fun to do. And then, yes, we started making like bread baking videos, and it was just a really good way to reach out to people, again, like worldwide, letting them know who was behind the brand and what we were doing with it and what Jim's ideas were. And people would ask very specific questions, like, can you ask him why he puts ice cubes halfway through? And Jim would address all those questions, and we'd make a video about that.
Yeah, so she was always involved in content and marketing, merchandising. She made some T-shirts or made sweatshirts for everybody that worked there. And yeah, always involved. She was the chief party officer. That was her official title.
Oh, I like that. Okay, well,
CEO.
CEO.
Yeah. So anything that didn't involve baking, I was involved in. People would ask me questions like, "How many times do you stir the starter?" I'm like, "I have no idea. I don't even know what the starter is." I'm like, "Jim, you have a question?"
Well, one of the people that came and asked questions was Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart came to you, not to diminish your bread baking skills, but right, we think of Martha Stewart as the queen of baking, and she came to you and said, "Help me bake bread."
It actually started out it started out with that baker from Tasmania.
Yes.
There was a baker in Tasmania that Tasmania that I knew. And she was in New York, and Lisa found her because Lisa more on social media. I was just really an Instagrammer, and found that here was this baker, and she's really a chef, meeting with Martha Stewart in New York. So then I messaged her, like, "How did you meet Martha? How did it come across that you got to cook with Martha?" She's like, "Well, I can introduce you to Martha." And so I think that was our first introduction. And then I think we sent her a pan. I don't remember the steps.
So Martha's niece, Sophie, is a huge sourdough bread baker. So I think then Sophie kind of took it and ran with it. And so she tested the pan first. So I think she tested the pan and loved it. And then said, "Can Martha have a pan? Can Martha have 2 more pans? Can Martha have 3 pans?" So I think Martha had a lot of people testing out, but she had 2 in her kitchen all through the pandemic. Every video she'd make at home, like she would be on the Today Show.
You could see,
just sitting right there. There's her bread pans. And
she started messaging me. She started sending me bread questions. I'd email her back at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning in Chicago. So an hour later on the East Coast, and she'd email me back. And Lisa's like, "How come you get to talk to Martha? Why won't you email me?" So yeah, Martha and I started, talking about bread baking. And it's the pandemic thing and the baking thing, and bakers they are the nicest people. And I think that's kind of just brought that's what we talked about. It wasn't Martha Stewart. We were talking about how do we bake better bread and how does the pan work? And then it's just fun, but it was pretty amazing, really.
I love that. So Woody, you and actually there's a funny story behind this. I just learned last night. You make a blog called the Challenger Journal. That was another thing that you were doing that I learned, that suddenly nobody could send emails to you this week.
Yes.
I forgot.
Thank you, Megan, for figuring that out. Yep. I wonder why.
That's how much you care about your blog right now.
Yeah.
Was that cool? Was that fun to sort of help build that content for
it was
brand?
Again. Yeah. I mean, I think again, from the very beginning, when the Challenger Butterbur kind of like exploded, it was sort of like we had to tell a story. You know, it had to be just not a cast iron pan. It was like about the creation of it. And it was a family company and it was all made in the Midwest. So that was a really good format for us to be able to like put the story out there. And again, it was during the pandemic. So I was like, yeah, I'm sit and write a blog every day. You know, there's nothing else to do.
Right. And it started out with travel, and we weren't traveling. Lisa's like, well, I need to segue into something. She was really enjoying connecting with people and writing articles.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was definitely served its purpose during the pandemic, keeping me busy. But now we have plenty going on.
And that's a great segue. Is you jumped right in. So I think we grabbed lunch actually with Leslie Graham and that was like a fun, just like to meet her and, you know, thank her for bringing you guys here. But you jumped right in. And one of the fun things that you did was you were like, hey, do you guys like, I'm really into Halloween. What do you guys do here? And I'm like, oh, we do this, we do that. And all these great things. You're like, no. What creations do you do? And I was like, well, the houses get decorated. And then that just spun us into a whole creative journey down to Halloween and holiday light. But tell us your version of that. I mean, I love that because you became like basically our creative director. And don't you worry, you're coming back. Tell us about where your love for Halloween came from.
Oh my gosh. I don't really know where that, I mean, just as like always as a little kid, I mean, I've just always loved Halloween. It's my favorite holiday. Love doing the costumes for the kids. We decorated our house in Northfield. We had like woods in the front and we actually had our landscapers put a path through it and we would haunt the woods during, you know, October and kids could come walk through and I'd decorate little scenarios, little witchy covens out there and little graveyards and stuff.
The trees. Yeah.
So it's just always been a good way to like, you know, express my creativity even before we had kids. I remember like my friends who were older and having kids, they were like, oh my God, you've got to have a child. Like, because this is getting a little crazy. Like I would just go over the top with our parties. They're like, all right, it's about time to start doing this for somebody else. So I've always loved Halloween. And I think it was one night having dinner with you and Christy. And Christy loved Halloween too. And she was more like, yeah, for like Christmas, we should do lights. And I was like, for Halloween, we should decorate. And I think it was the next day, Monica being Monica sent out a very detailed email. Like, so here's what I'm thinking. And Christy called me. She's like, what did we do last night? She's like, how many glasses of wine did we have? And what did we commit to? And I'm like, I'll totally take on Halloween. So, I mean, I think it was just incredible the way it all came together and the giant spiders climbing around Motto. And I think people really enjoyed that, like all the neighborhoods were decorated and Christmas was beautiful with the little twinkly lights crossing the street and in the woods. And
so we'll definitely do it. We'll throw some photos into the show notes, but
yes,
it's always been a big holiday for Serenbe. There's a Halloween parade that the residents do. Amy Mass, who we just had on, instigated a flash mob one year.
Yes,
Yep.
I love that.
And so I
wish we had missed that.
I know. I was asking her for a new one and she's like, well, Monica, a flash mob is supposed to be a surprise. I think having the spiders on the hill building and the textile lofts and all that just added a whole nother like element, I think, the sort of spirit, because I think sometimes you know that spirit's here in the community, that sort of festive gathering. But I think that sort of was a physical manifestation of it. And so you then got onto the social committee. And then most importantly, maybe we take a few minutes to talk about the Art Farm Soiree that you and Ann Pratt are co-hosting this year. Tell us about the soiree, why we need to attend.
Yeah, well, it'll be the first, hopefully, annual fundraiser for the Art Farm. So they have never hosted a fundraiser before. So Serenbe Soiree is going to be Thursday, September 21st. And it's the kickoff of their Under the Tent series. So it's 10 days of Les Farfadets, which is like a Cirque du Soleil type of performance, and the Idols will also be performing. So it'll be like a little small snippet of both of those performances, but also a cocktail hour. And we've got some really like cool themed food and drinks. We have amazing caterer that we're bringing in. So we're going to start sharing little tidbits on social media of what to expect and really hoping to also get some amazing live auction items. So yeah, there's some exciting stuff
Yeah, maybe a challenger breadware party.
Well, yeah, Tony's trying to talk to him into hosting a bread baking class. And, I know you just are reopening your little cooking scenario over there at Gainey Hall. So, yeah.
I love all of those things.
I think that's part of what got me to, I kept saying I was going to start and started when we got in our house and we're sort of settled. But yeah, Tony wanted a class and Danielle was talking about learning to bake. So then I thought, okay, I got to bake again. It's been a year. I just looked on Instagram. It was December 2021. Yeah, December 21 was the last time I posted on Instagram.
Right.
And you could, like I said, hours a day. So it's been good, but it'll be so fun to, maybe hold a class.
One thing that you've mentioned a couple times, but which I haven't touched on, is you guys moved into your house in August, but you've already bought your house.
So people told us that people at Serenbe do that. They're like, oh, you'll move again. We're like, oh my God, that is crazy.
We were shocked.
Never do that.
That was one of the first things that we kept saying. People would say, we're in our third house. We're in our fifth house. We're like, who moves within a community like that? Doesn't happen in like the suburbs of Chicago very often. Then here we are. Yeah. Within a year, we're now in a second home.
Yeah. We just sort of like the opportunity presented itself. We had our eyes on a lot and we had horses in Chicago and kind of missed that sort of environment. And so we just found a place here that was not for sale and there was somebody renting it. And so we were not allowed to go in and see the house and we bought it sight unseen and no looking back. We're in it now.
We had never walked in the house when we put in the offer.
Wow. You brought in fabulous designers, Mr. and Mrs. Sharp, to help you imagine it. So,
especially since we hadn't seen the inside. We had seen some photographs of it and I was like, oh, it's adorable. But, when we got in, it wasn't necessarily our style. And it had been rented for a while. So we're like, we have to do a few things. And we realized we had to do a few more things. So that was when we brought in Mr. and Mrs. Sharp. And then they were like, and we should also do this. I'm like, yes, we should. So
they're good at that.
And so now you're near the horses rather than having your own horse.
Oh my gosh. They come right up to the fence. I can pet them. They come up to our fence.
So the horse pasture comes right up to our fence. So literally 8 feet outside of our patio, the horses are in their pasture and they've got some woods inside their pasture, which are also sort of adjacent to us. And so the horses come right up to us in the woods. Our dog, who got used to horses in Chicago, barks at them like he used to in Chicago, but they're so close. We can almost pet them from the pool. So, yeah.
I see a horse in your future, maybe.
I know. Well, yes, we do have a friend that volunteers at the stables. And she was like, maybe there might be a horse that's available to. I'm like, I'm not really interested in riding anymore, but I would love to be able to pet one that lives in our backyard without having to, do all the other caretaking.
Exactly. Steve, what do you think it is why people pop around? I think everybody gets inspired by the different neighborhoods and the new architecture, but it is a unique phenomenon.
Well, there's something about Serenbe that opens people's creative aspects, and creative people want to keep doing things. And so the idea of a new project and different houses, this isn't just another street with more houses. Each is very different. So people start fantasizing, gee, if that was my house, this is what I would do. And next thing you know, then they're on that journey to make it their house. And so it's creative people doing creative things.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
One of the things that really drew us here, and I think, Steve, you're the one kind of spirit, it's everything. It looks different. Like this neighborhood looked like it's been here for 50 years. The other ones we looked at, they look more subdivision-y. This feels home, right? The houses are different. You didn't cut Serenbe feels homey because there's still trees. There's sidewalks. There's just nature surrounding it. It's not been leveled like what happens in a lot of subdivisions.
When I realized we were going to be a developer, I really started analyzing the difference between the places I loved and the places that were okay.
Yep.
And I really realized there was a big difference between developments and towns that have been built over many decades and centuries. And so we really focused on what were the differences between those two, and then specifically did that. So this is why we're absolute on the placement of each house from the curb and the height, but we encourage the variety of architecture, which you don't find in developments.
You don't.
Find in towns.
Yeah.
And then the real effort to keep trees, even if they weren't specimen trees, close to the parking lot. So we're very careful. We don't tear it down. And then to work with the power companies, they want you to clear all these big swaths. And so those are the key things that people think this is a much older community than it really is.
Absolutely. And I think it's why people call it magical. I think it's part of that because it just feels like it's always been here. And I think it's a huge draw for me.
Yeah. And we wanted to move somewhere where we could walk to something. So that was going to be hard to find.
Oh, yeah.
We were like, let's live in the country. Let's find a little country house. But like, where do we walk to? You can't walk to a coffee house. You can't walk to a neighbor's house. So we were like, we're never going to be able to find that kind of rural dream.
Right.
Be able to walk to something. And now we can live with horses coming up to our back gate, but we can walk to the wine shop and home from the wine shop or, walk to dinner or walk to Monica's house or.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, we looked at Charleston where we got married and we're trying to say, could we live enough outside the city? So we felt not in a city, but we said, but we want to be able to walk and get coffee or walking to dinner. And that, I think it was more coffee. We almost didn't even make the leap to dinner, but now we can walk to dinner and we can walk to the general store to pick up something for lunch or something for dinner. And yeah, I think that's part of the magic too.
That's where Serenbe remains very unusual because you can have a very urban life in the middle of this forest and connected to forest. And generally, you have to choose one and drive to the other.
Right. Exactly. We didn't think we'd find it. Yeah.
That's exactly what we were looking for. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did not think we would find it. And you did it.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for that.
Common sense.
Yeah. Well, and we're not moving again. That's why we call this house Woods End. This is our final house in Serenbe.
Now remember, this podcast is dated, so we can back up. And then you decide to build.
What the challenge said in 2023.
It'd take a lot for us to find a better location for us than right where we are right now.
Oh,
but you never know.
Yeah. So finally, we ask everybody that comes on, if somebody was visiting Serenbe for the first time, what is the one thing you would tell them they can't miss while they're here? One or two things. And I'll start with Woody and then we'll do Jim.
Gosh, there's so many. I think for me personally, it might seem kind of silly, but I love going out to see the farm animals. So when we first moved here, and I still go, but I would go probably twice a week. And then you have to get the feed at the inn. So I would go in and they would be like, oh, are you staying with us? What room are you in? I'm like, no, we live here. And they're like, oh, okay. So it's like $5 a bucket. And they were like, all right. I'd come back 2 days later and they were like, oh, are you staying here? I'm like, no, remember, I was just here. So now I just walk in. They're like, here's your bucket. So I think it's kind of funny. I'm not sure if a lot of residents continue to go out and visit the farm animals, but again, we had that in our last house and I love that connection to the animals. And that reminds me that we are like in the country, that we are living rural as much as, we can walk to dinner or to the general store.
Yep.
So I love that connection. And that path out there is beautiful. And then we just end up having a drink on the porch at the inn. We're like, oh, well, we're here. We might as well. So I feel like that's just like a magical little experience that reminds me what a place that we live in, that we're so lucky to be here, that we just have that in a golf cart. I can be there in 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I think it's really what I was saying, but I think it's walking. I love the amount of woods that we're surrounded by that are full of trails. And Steve would like this. One time I wondered, why are the trails better marked? I don't really know where I'm going. And some said Steve's idea was you're supposed to just wander. And it changed everything for me because then I went on walks and I wandered. And I was one of these I kind of tend to get focused. I say, well, I'm going to do this in 42 minutes. And so then I'm walking and I know where I'm going and I got this loop. And all of a sudden I started wandering and then it got better. And so there's just so many places to wander in the woods, out of the woods, whether it's the general stores we were saying or the hill or anywhere. I wander. You're supposed to buy me that T-shirt that says wander.
Yeah.
And we never did, but we will.
Some people have said, I got lost in the woods, but I found myself.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That's kind of what happens when you're kind of in that vulnerable place out there. It's amazing what can transpire.
So that was it. It changed. It did. It changed who I was by just clicking that switch in my brain that said I don't have to have a destination. I should just wander.
When we went out and found the synchronous fireflies about a week ago, we saw somebody post that there were these synchronous fireflies. I'm like, we got to go out and find that. So we didn't know. We just sort of followed the golf carts. And like, I see a couple of people over there. We parked the cart. We wandered into the woods. It was pitch dark and found tens of thousands of fireflies. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
If anybody listening to podcast doesn't know about, like in Chicago, we'd see a firefly and it'd rise out of the ground and fly and you'd watch it and you'd see maybe 2 or 3. Here, it's a different type of firefly and there's literally hundreds, if not thousands, and they all kind of blink at the same time. It's almost like you're looking at twinkling Christmas lights in the woods. Yeah, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, they're pretty rare. They're
Yeah.
pretty rare.
Yes.
Yeah, we looked into it. They are rare, and we got them. And someone said it's the nature that we have here.
Yeah.
Nature and organic, and there's not a lot of
And it's dark.
stuff in the air, and it's a very dark place. So yeah. Oh yeah, and I love the stars here. I guess I should say that. There's so many stars here compared to Chicago. It's almost the way I remember as a little kid before light pollution became a thing. So we love every single night. I think we look at the stars and we'll look up and it'll be a little cloudy. Like, oh, now the Big Dipper, 20 minutes ago, we couldn't see it. There it is just above us. It's incredible.
So what we're really seeing is like we have nice sky regulations. We don't allow chemicals, so we don't have laws.
Exactly.
All these environmental things. And what's happening is the ecology. So with fireflies, the Audubon sees more birds here than they see in any area they have to go out. And so this also, because all the things in nature, we see how they're coming in a natural. This is why people are feeling better here too, and they're reacting.
I agree 100%. Yep.
It all balances with nature, and we have been so interrupting that every place we developed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here we're not. And then, and I think, and everybody came here and found that. I think that's why everybody gets along with everybody and everybody talks to everybody is they all found that same love. And so you have that in common. And so everybody becomes a friend. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what age they are. They could be 30 years younger, 30 years older. It just doesn't matter.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end, Jim. I really appreciate both of your times. I know I had to kind of talk you into that you would have something to say, but I think we've determined that you do, and it's interesting and fun. So I really, really appreciate you guys doing it.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. That was fun.